And it's just very, very interesting to me to see the answers that you guys gave me in the polls, because it was very consistent with my theory. Hey guys, it's Kanika. Welcome back to my channel. A little update is that I'm back in Paris and I clearly have changed my hair. I've gone lighter. Apparently this is the lightest I can go because my natural hair is black. So it's like a gradual process. Should I actually want to go that far? Anyway, today I'll be talking about sociopaths and sexuality. Please make sure you like and subscribe. So essentially, I have a hypothesis that I've come to after many conversations with people I know, and I think 2 studies I've seen online. I mean, it's not very widely searched apparently, but my hypothesis was that nearly all sociopaths are bisexual. And I came to this because everybody that I know personally who has ASPD identifies as bisexual. Now, of course, people can lie, people can alter their answers to suit a certain theory, but I believe they are self-reporting in a way that is accurate, and we have access to a big database of people with cluster B disorders. This isn't really common. This is basically the first time that people are actually doing this. I mean, I looked through articles on JSTOR, which is where the academic papers are, and there's not a lot of research that has gone into this. And I believe that sociopaths tend to be more towards the bisexual side. I'm not saying that they can't be straight or they can't be only gay. I feel like they are able to be social chameleons when it comes to the bedroom as well. Now, before I get like 20 people piling on this saying that they're sociopaths and that they aren't bisexual, I am making it quite clear that I by no means am speaking for every sociopath or every person with ASPD. Like, I'm just putting it out there so that I don't have to read it like 20 times in the comments. But I do believe that we're onto something here. And I'm not sure if it's just the fact that we are social chameleons and whether this can affect our lives in the bedroom as well, or whether we're just open to new adventures because we are risk takers. We don't really have much inhibition. Like, we're pretty much out there all the time trying new things and not really staying committed to one particular type of lifestyle. And I think bisexuality and the fluidity of it is so consistent with sociopathic traits. I mean, whenever I thought about it, whoever I asked always was bisexual. Of course, there are outliers that I have encountered myself. I think there was 2 people I know who didn't consider themselves to be bisexual. And it's just very, very interesting to me to see the answers that you guys gave me in the polls, because it was very consistent with my theory. And it is just that, it is a theory. I am not, doing clinical trials to see whether my theory holds water. This is informal, of course, and people can answer what they want to answer. But I have some faith in my audience, and I know that you wouldn't purposely be lying to suit an agenda, because you have no reason to do that. I mean, you didn't know what I was asking about when I put that poll up. So from the information I've collated from that and my own personal knowledge, I feel like there is such a strong presence of bisexuality in the community versus bisexuality in the general population. Whether this is correlation doesn't equal causation, which could be the factor, that we're talking about here. I just think that it's pretty coincidental that something so significant has been seen. And I, of course, as you know, am bisexual. So I thought, maybe these people are the same as me. Maybe it's a sociopath thing. And I still kind of think it is a sociopath or even cluster B kind of thing. Another thing I find very interesting about the sexuality of sociopaths or people with ASPD is that they are constantly seeking the kind of excitement that they lack in life. As I've mentioned before, I'm quite flat. I'm always flat. I don't have huge mood fluctuations. and neither does any person that I know with ASPD. So the main things I wanted to talk about were the high sex drive of sociopaths, the risk-taking behavior of sociopaths, and also the power and control that comes from sex and how it affects people with ASPD. There have been plenty of studies about the sex drives of sociopaths and people within the cluster B disorders. And these show that sociopaths do have a higher sex drive than most of the neurotypical people that were polled as well. And so I think that this is very relevant when it comes to understanding sexuality, when it comes to a cluster B person, when it's not necessarily identical to the experiences of a neurotypical person. The research into the sexuality of sociopaths and psychopaths goes back to Hervé Cleckley in his Mask of Sanity. He spoke greatly about how sociopaths tend to have higher sex drives and engage in riskier behavior because of a lack of inhibition. This coupled leads to disastrous results for some people. The high sex drive is something that is not controllable by the people with sociopathy, psychopathy, antisocial personality. They are more likely to go out and fulfill these desires rather than curb them. Because I'm not saying we're a slave to our impulses. We can absolutely deny ourselves things that we want. It's not too difficult. It's not that much worse than a neurotypical. But the sociopaths that I've known and the ones that I've read in literature do tend to have very high sex drives. They not only have this as a personal thing, it's the fact that because sociopaths tend to be so emotionally flat, this is the only way to kind of get a rise out of themselves as well as others. If I'm speaking personally, I have been in very close calls in terms of car crashes and whatnot, and my heartbeat does not increase at all. Like at all. I was wearing my Apple Watch, so I checked that. And so there's very little that will cause a huge jump in how we feel. And I feel like sex is one of those things. I'm not speaking about my own sex life because probably Alice Murphy is watching this and is going to write another article. And I'm not promiscuous. I'm going to make that very clear. So I'm not talking about myself, but I am talking about sociopaths in general. And of course, there are outliers, like I always say. And if you're one of them, you don't need to jump in the comments because I know you exist. But the research has shown that this raised libido is something that is seen in people with most cluster B disorders, including histrionic. Histrionic is an interesting one, so we'll discuss that in another video. But of course, sociopaths and narcissists really use sex, not just for their own contentment, but also for power. This brings me to my second point, which was risky behavior. You know that sociopaths have very strong impulses. I'm not saying that we can't control them. I'm not saying that we are that much worse than neurotypicals when it comes to controlling impulses. But because we don't really have an internal regulator that tells us that this is really risky and we probably shouldn't do it, we tend to engage in behavior that could probably get us killed quite often. And this includes unsafe sex. When psychopaths and sociopaths were originally being studied during the earlier editions of the DSM, it was noted that the high sex drive led to very risky behavior, including unsafe sex, which led to other venereal diseases. And that's of course not good for anybody. I feel like now with the invention of Bumble and Tinder and Grindr that people have so much access to, casual sex or casual hookups, and the sociopaths in the community are going to have a lot more to pick from. Personally, I think this is something that they should avoid because I think that casual sex is not healthy for most people. I'm not saying all people, but yeah, I think a monogamous relationship is ideal for both sociopaths and non-sociopaths. I mean, if you believe something else, that's totally fine, but I want to talk about how these risks lead to very disastrous consequences. For the sociopaths that were studied, a large number of them did end up catching venereal diseases like syphilis and unfortunately HIV, which of course there is no cure for. That's something that's just so so common. Not as common in the current age where we do know about protection and we do know about clinics that specialize in this, but in the past, of course, we did not have that kind of scientific knowledge or access to medicine. So it's been noted from Blackley and beyond that the mask of sanity is hiding a lot of things, including a very high sex drive and the risky behavior that goes into fulfilling those desires. And my third point is that sociopaths often use sex for power. I mean, sex is often used as power generally, but in terms of relationships with sociopaths, they tend to be very, very good at it. They know from a technical standpoint what to do, but they obviously do not have the emotions that attach to sex, and therefore they can use it as a tool to get what they want or to exert power over another person. And you can see this in terms of Ted Bundy, Jodi Arias. They were said to be quite phenomenal. And the love bombing also included the physical act of sex and giving the other person exactly what they wanted in the bedroom in order to gain some power and control over that person's life. And I see that happening a lot. And it's not necessarily on purpose, just like with love bombing. I don't think love bombing is always intentional. I think we sometimes just get really excited to meet new people. Like I said, we don't sit here and plot everybody's revenge and death and whatnot. Yeah, it's very, very clear that sociopaths use sex as a way to manipulate sometimes, or even to just indulge in their own desires, because they don't have that little voice in your head that I've heard about that tells you not to do some things, because I don't have that little person in my head. That person is Sam. That's kind of how I don't do these things. And what I wanted to talk about was Catherine Knight. Now, she obviously did not have ASPD from the diagnosis that I read. She had borderline personality, which is also a cluster B. Now, despite how violent and awful she was to the men in her life, nobody left her because apparently she was phenomenal when it came to the bedroom. And so she exerted this power over these men, and they stayed because they didn't want to give up that life in the bedroom. That had some very disastrous consequences, including the murder of John Price, which I will be discussing in another video because I find that case very, very interesting. So these are my main thoughts on sociopathy and sexuality. I would love to hear your opinions. How do you feel? Like, if you are a sociopath, do you agree with me? Do you think that we're mostly bisexual? Do you agree with the high sex drive? If you're from another part of the cluster B personality, like, I would love to know what you're thinking and whether or not you agree with this. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.